On the world map, there exists a small peninsula that has consistently been the epicenter of the world's most intense geopolitical conflicts. They share one bloodline, one language, and one history spanning thousands of years. Yet today, they are severed by a line both invisible and all too real, becoming two nations with two completely opposite fates. This is the story of North and South Korea. This video will take us back in time. We make these videos to share complex stories with as many people as possible. If you support that mission, please like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's get right to the story. For millennia, the shadow of the Chinese giant cast itself over East Asia. China established a unique world order through a vassal state system. Among them, Korea was a special case. It was not just a vassal, it was a near-perfect replica. Korea adopted China's model of governance, its Confucian ideology, and even its isolationist policies. This relationship defined Korea's identity for centuries, providing stability under the protection of the world's most powerful empire. But no empire lasts forever. Starting in the 16th century, European powers began to chip away at China's influence. Vietnam fell to the French, and in the 19th century, China itself suffered a bitter defeat in the Opium Wars. Everything truly changed when a new power rose next door: Japan. After being forced open by the United States, feudal Japan modernized at breakneck speed, and its new, modern army set its sights on China. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895, ended in a crushing victory for Japan. This was an earthquake that shattered the entire East Asian order. For Korea, this was a turning point. Under the treaty terms, China had to renounce its control over Korea. After a millennium, Korea was suddenly independent. But this was not an independence they chose. It was one imposed by the victor, Japan. Korea was now trapped between a rising Japan and an ambitious Russia. Trying to survive, the new Korean Empire attempted its own rapid reforms, leaning on Russia as a counterweight to Japan. This was a fatal miscalculation. When Russia and Japan both vied for control, the Russo-Japanese War, 1904, erupted. Japan won again. Korea's last shield had fallen. In 1905, it was forced to become a Japanese protectorate. By 1910, it was formally annexed, becoming a colony of the Japanese Empire. This began Korea's darkest period. Japan enforced a brutal assimilation policy. The Korean language, its customs, and its traditions were banned, replaced by Japanese culture. People were forced to change their names to Japanese ones. The economy was re-engineered to serve Japan, efficiently extracting resources. While literacy and infrastructure improved, the price was a brutal occupation, infamously forcing countless women and girls into sexual slavery as comfort women for the Japanese army. When Japan finally surrendered in 1945, Korea was liberated, only to find itself in a power vacuum, lacking the experience people needed to run a country. As the Japanese flag fell, the Soviet hammer and sickle rose in the north. The Cold War confrontation had found its new stage. Fearing a total Soviet takeover, the United States needed a rapid solution. Two young American officers with little knowledge of Korean history were tasked with proposing a division. They simply took a map and chose an arbitrary, pre-existing line, the 38th parallel, to split the country, giving each side roughly equal parts. To their surprise, the Soviets agreed immediately. The US was unaware that Imperial Russia had, years earlier, discussed that exact line with Japan for dividing influence. In essence, the US had accidentally given the Soviets exactly what they wanted. After 1,000 years as a unified entity, Korea was cut in two. The division was meant to be temporary, but Cold War suspicions derailed all negotiations. Two separate governments formed. Kim Il-sung, a former anti-Japanese guerrilla, led the Soviet-backed North. In the South, the US military government eventually backed the politician Syngman Rhee. In 1948, two separate states were declared, the Republic of Korea South and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea North. This division created two critical problems. The North, where Japan had built most of the industry, lacked fertile farmland. The South was the nation's breadbasket but lacked industry. The North faced chronic food shortages. The second problem was existential. A prosperous US-backed South Korea would forever threaten the North's legitimacy. To solve both problems, the North saw one path: reunification by force. On June 25, 1950, with Soviet and Chinese backing, the Northern Army stormed across the 38th parallel. They achieved stunning success, pushing the Southern Army into a tiny pocket around Busan. The tide turned when the United Nations, led by the US, intervened with a massive amphibious landing at Incheon. This cut off the Northern Army, and the UN forces counterattacked, pushing all the way to the Chinese border. Fearing a US-backed state on its doorstep, China acted. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers flooded across the Yalu River, pushing the UN forces back. By 1951, the war became a bloody, horrific stalemate, right back where it started, around the 38th parallel. In 1953, an armistice was signed. The war ended, but peace never came. From the ashes, the North chose an ambitious and harsh path. They developed their own state ideology, Juche self-reliance. At its core, Juche is a philosophy of total independence. Haunted by a history of being used by foreign powers, Juche was a declaration that Korea would never again let its fate be decided by others. The state-controlled economy was the tool. The goal wasn't economic efficiency, it was political independence. This blended with an obsessive fear of invasion. The military-first Songun policy dominated. The army wasn't just for defense, it was involved in every aspect of life, from construction to logistics. In the 1960 seconds, with its industrial base, the North's economy actually outperformed the South's, but the model stagnated. In 1975, they defaulted on their international loans and never paid, cutting themselves off from global finance. The real blow came in 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed. North Korea lost its biggest ally and aid provider. This, combined with the death of Kim Il-sung in 1994, triggered a devastating famine known as the Arduous March. To ensure its absolute survival, the new leader, Kim Jong-il, turned to one final guarantee: nuclear weapons. In the 1950 seconds, South Korea was just as poor, corrupt, and authoritarian as the North. Things came to a head in 1960, and a military coup in 1962 brought General Park Chung-hee to power. Park had one ultimate goal: make South Korea richer than the North. He looked at the only successful model available: Japan. He adopted Japanese-style state capitalism, but with even more aggressive state control. The government didn't run the economy, it directed it. All banks were state-owned. The government used this control to channel all the nation's savings into select family-owned companies, which became known as the chaebols. In exchange for near-infinite capital, the chaebols, like LG, Hyundai, Samsung, had to follow government orders. When Hyundai refused to build a shipyard, Park threatened to bankrupt them. Today, they are the world's largest shipbuilder. This method produced the miracle on the Han River. From 1960 to 1990, income grew at nearly 7% per year, an unprecedented speed. But this miracle was built on a brutal foundation. Behind the economic prosperity was a harsh military dictatorship that crushed all dissent. In 1979, Park Chung-hee was assassinated, only for another military general to seize power. In 1980, a massive student protest in the city of Gwangju was brutally suppressed by the military, who opened fire on their own citizens. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, were killed. The Gwangju massacre became an unhealable scar, but it also ignited the fight for democracy. Throughout the 1980 seconds, students, workers, and the middle class relentlessly took to the streets. The pressure became so immense that in 1987, the regime finally buckled. They agreed to direct presidential elections and a new, democratic constitution. The journey from military dictatorship to a free democracy was an inspiring story of persistence. They had won their freedom. But just as their new democracy was taking root, an economic storm threatened to destroy everything. The 1997 Asian financial crisis exposed the dark side of the chaebol model: cronyism and massive bad loans. The economy collapsed. Forced to restructure by the IMF, Korea pivoted again. Needing a new export, they found it in the most unlikely place: their own culture. This cultural explosion, the Hallyu, or Korean wave, had its roots in the democratization of the 1980 seconds. Censorship was lifted and new ideas flooded in. The government strategically supported this new soft power industry. K-dramas came first, but the real spearhead was K-pop. Built on an industrialized idol model, entertainment companies SM, JYP, YG established a factory-like process for producing stars. The result was a global phenomenon. K-pop became more than music. It was a powerful tool of soft power, attracting millions of fans, and, ironically, becoming a major ideological threat to the regime in the north. When Kim Jong-il died in 2011, his son, Kim Jong-un, took power. Under this third generation, the north has carefully allowed some market activity, jangmadang, to exist. Cheap solar panels have given many families their own power source, bypassing the state's failing grid and allowing access to outside media. Geopolitically, the policy remains a mix of confrontation, nuclear tests, and diplomacy, historic summits. To survive crippling sanctions, the North relies on its last major ally, China, which fears a regime collapse on its border. Once again, Korea finds itself dependent on its powerful neighbor. Meanwhile, South Korea is a global cultural and tech powerhouse, but it faces its own modern problems: massive inequality, a shrinking birth rate, an aging society, and the suffocating power of the chaebols. And so, we arrive at today. Two nations, one people, still on two vastly different paths. One, a vibrant, democratic, cultural superpower, riddled with complex social issues. The other, an isolated, nuclear-armed state showing a remarkable, stubborn ability to survive against all outside pressure. The story of the Korean Peninsula is not over. The desire for reunification still burns in the hearts of many, but the path to making that dream a reality remains distant and undefined. What does their future hold? Will the two nations find a common path, or will this division be permanent? Only time will tell. Wiederbende. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please leave a comment and check out our other videos to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.